Hello everyone and welcome to the lockdown.
Take this thing off. Welcome back to the lockdown in Tokyo. Well, not actually, because I could be filming this in the middle of the Shibuya crossing if I wanted to. I'd be completely in my legal right to do so, because things here are a little bit different than around the world when it comes to managing corona. Let me explain. 2 weeks have passed since I uploaded my last video on the corona crisis. You can watch it up here or up here. In that video I mentioned that in the next 1 or 2 weeks there will most likely be a kind of a lockdown coming to Tokyo, and it was actually announced 5 days ago. On April 6th, it was announced that it would be announced 2 days from there, so it was again announced 3 days earlier. So on April 8th, Shinzo Abe, the Prime Minister of Japan, after a lot of deliberation, after a lot of waiting, finally announced that there would be a state of emergency in 7 prefectures around Japan. That includes Tokyo, the neighboring Kanagawa, Chiba, Saitama, as well as Osaka, Hyogo Prefecture and Fukuoka Prefecture. The state of emergency allows for local leaders in these prefectures to have more stricter measures when it comes to fighting corona. Now, this announcement came almost exactly 2 weeks after the Olympic Games were officially postponed to next year, and coincidentally also since that time the numbers just kept rising in Tokyo and also in other prefectures. What a coincidence. Now, in his announcement, Shinzo Abe specifically mentioned that there won't be a total lockdown coming as you have it in other European countries, in Italy, in Spain, and also in many parts of the US. What he forgot to mention is that that is not because you don't want to have that kind of interruption of daily life as you have it in other parts of the world, but simply because Japan's constitution does not allow for limiting of movements of people. So you would have to change the constitution, which is a really difficult process, obviously, and that's something that they couldn't do in such a short time frame. So people are still allowed to go outside whenever they want. The government really can't do anything to block them, so there's no fines, there's no kind of penalties for going outside and just doing whatever you want. So what exactly is the point of a state of emergency if it doesn't really limit the freedom of movement, and if people can still go outside and gather in masses if they want to? Well, it's really for the prefectures or the affected prefectures, for them to have kind of like this official statement that there is a state of emergency, and they can now ask people very strongly not to go outside, and they can also ask certain businesses from being closed. I'll get to that in a second, but they have this kind of official guidance from the central government of Japan that said there is a state of emergency, you need to take this seriously. However, it does also have certain legal consequences that the prefectures now have that they didn't have before the state of emergency. One of those is they can appropriate land and certain buildings to be used as medical facilities without the approval of the owner. So for example, you can go to a hotel, and if they need some extra beds, for example, if all of the hospitals would be full, they could just go to a hotel and say this hotel is now used as a medical facility, and the hotel could not do anything about this. In prefectures where there is not a state of emergency, you can't really do that legally, so they would have to battle a legal battle in order to get that. And another thing is also they can force companies to give them medical supplies, and if they don't cooperate, they will have to pay a fine, which was something that was not possible before. For now, overall, they cannot really force people to not go outside, and they can also not force businesses to close down. Instead, they are taking a more cooperative approach, as it was basically since the entire corona crisis started here in Japan. So what they have been asking from the citizens since the start of the lockdown was to not go outside except for essential outings, so going to the supermarket, going to the drugstore and stuff like that. They also asked non-essential businesses to close down. There was kind of a fighting point between certain prefectures and the central government. I'll get to that in a second. Basically, I also asked companies to let their workers telecommute if possible, so work from home, and also to just kind of have less people on the trains, which also does kind of work, but also doesn't kind of work. I'll get to that a little bit later. So almost immediately after the state of emergency was announced, there was already fighting kind of between the central government and especially Tokyo with Yuriko Koike, the governor. As I said, there were certain businesses that should close down, but it wasn't really clear at the beginning which businesses that would be. So you had in Tokyo, the governor, she wanted to have certain businesses closed down that included barbershops, that included like home improvement shops, gardening shops, flower shops, as well as like nightlife establishments. You had izakayas, you had kind of bars and clubs, as well as pachinko parlors. Now the central government wasn't quite agreeing with that fully. They said that barbershops, like home improvement shops and also gardening stores are part of day-to-day life, so they need to be open. And you kind of had this discussion going back and forth. The most recent compromise that arrived at is that home improvement shops and barber shops and gardening shops, they will stay open. However, like these nightlife establishments, you have izakayas, you have restaurants, you have bars and everything, they are asked to close down by 8 p.m. and also to not serve any alcohol after 7 p.m. This is kind of mostly so that people who finish work, you know, it's a traditional thing to go to a nomikai after work with your colleagues, to not do that anymore. Because yeah, if the bar closes at 8 and if there's no alcohol anymore at 7, then that kind of falls through, and that should ease kind of the crowds in Tokyo, hopefully. And most recently, the central government also allowed all other prefectures around Japan to ask their citizens from refraining of going to these kind of places, to izakayas, to any kind of nightlife establishments, to help prevent the spread of corona in those areas as well. But again, there is no legal basis for all of these kind of requests. I've heard that there are some police officers going around in like these nightlife entertainment areas around Tokyo and asking people to go home, but they cannot kind of find them, or they cannot tell them legally to go home. The same for businesses. The government cannot tell businesses to close down. It's more on a kind of voluntary and also a kind of a shaming basis. You know, if everyone is closing down and there's just one business that is open, well, shameful for them to not follow the suit and follow what everybody's doing. So that kind of helps as well. And also the government in Tokyo is allocating 500,000 yen each small to medium-sized business, or up to 500,000 yen that closes down, more if they have more than one shop, which is around $5,000 just for this 1 month of April until the state of emergency is over. So how has this kind of soft lockdown worked so far? So today's the first weekend since it was announced, and it seems like it has been working somewhat. You have major transportation lines in Tokyo that are reporting numbers dropping to up to 40% compared to same time last year. For example, the very busy Yamanote line. The most busy section on that line is between Ueno and Okachimachi. In that section, passenger numbers have dropped 40% compared to last year. Also another busy section between Shinjuku and Shin-Okubo, the passenger numbers there have also dropped 36%. In other parts of the country, in Osaka and in Hyogo, numbers have dropped around 20%. The same with metro lines also, so a really decreased number of passengers. Also, if you go to many places in Tokyo, they will feel very deserted compared to how they would be normally. If you, for example, go to Shibuya Crossing, it's much less busy than it would be normally on a weekend. Also some other places around Ginza, Shinjuku, places like that. I've only seen it, obviously. I didn't go outside. I'm a good citizen, but yeah, from what I heard. Why are you laughing? I'm a good foreigner, I don't go outside. The problem with that is that Shinzo Abe, in his announcement of the state of emergency, said that the goal for this 1 month period between April 8th and May 6th, which is just after the very busy holiday period of Golden Week, would be to reduce human-to-human contact by 80% in the country. If that happens, then within this 1 month, corona can be mostly beat. Now the problem is, as I said, the major train numbers are reduced by 40% and not by 80%. Some others are only reduced by 20%, again very far off from this goal of 80%. I also remember reading in an article that an expert said that, yeah, you can beat corona in 1 month if there's an 80% decrease in human-to-human contact. But if the decrease is only 70%, suddenly it will take 3 months instead of these 1 month to beat corona. So you can imagine how long it would then take if the human-to-human contact is reduced by 40% and not by 80%. Unfortunately, many people still have to go to work, and that means in Japan it's usually always means going on a train. And these trains are still, well, they are less packed, but during rush hour they can still get very packed. From what I've seen of pictures on the Yamanote line, for example, still full of people, not as packed as usual. They're not like sardines in a can, but it's more like sardines in a fishing net. A little bit more space, but not a lot. And lastly, I think another major issue is that there is a kind of a general fatigue when it comes to the corona crisis in Japan. It has been around here for now more than 3 months already. So you had the first case obviously already in January, and you've kind of had corona here in the news cycle in and out. Since January you had panic buying already of toilet paper, you had panic buying of food as well to some degree. I think people are just kind of getting tired of corona, and especially there is no real sense of urgency anymore there, because the state of emergency was called 3 months after the first corona was discovered, which is a much bigger kind of time frame than in any other country around the world, except for like Sweden or countries that just completely deny corona, like Turkmenistan or something like that. So people are kind of like over corona, which sounds weird because now the numbers are rising, but it's been so long that corona has been here. Everyday life has just kind of continued. Now it's the state of emergency, but it's still continuing to some degree. So yeah, I think that's kind of an issue, and in my opinion there should be more urgency conveyed from the government to the people. Around this, they are trying now, but it's kind of too late, little to some degree, especially like you have infighting between central government and the most affected area of Corona, Tokyo, and you kind of have this infighting about which businesses should stay open. That's not really a good sign or not a good message to the citizens. It's not really giving them a security as how serious they should take Corona, in my opinion. So what's going to happen from now on? Basically you have this, as I mentioned, the state of emergency going on until May 6th, just after Golden Week. The central government kind of already implied that they will be looking 2 weeks time to see how the measures are holding up, because that's kind of the incubation period before you can see the Corona numbers. Currently the numbers have been rising in Tokyo at least every day. You've had them rising from basically after the Olympics were cancelled to around 40, 60 per day. I think by this time we're at around 200, which is the latest number from yesterday. The numbers just keep rising, but again, these are numbers from kind of 2 weeks ago, so you cannot really tell how good the measures are working because it's only been 3 or 4 days. But yeah, for us it's just going to be mostly staying at home, maybe walking around the area a little bit. There's some places that I want to explore like a forest and stuff like that. But yeah, no travel planned or anything, just mostly stay at home. Julie also doesn't have her job anymore right now for 1 month because her workplace closed down, so she's staying at home, enjoying rolling around in her kotatsu. That's gonna be it. I'm also gonna be trying to upload 2 videos every week from next week onwards. So if you want to see that, please subscribe. It's gonna be sometimes during the week and then once on the weekend. Yeah, hope you enjoyed this kind of update video on Corona. Might make another one depending on how the situation develops within the next month. But yeah, always like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. See ya.